Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Black, and I am one of the Rogue Women Writers. We're a group of 6 thriller writers whose backgrounds range from intelligence officers to cops to psychotherapists to White House strategists. To let you know how this is going to go for you participants in the Zoom room, you will be in the gallery during the reading. We encourage you to introduce yourselves by typing your name and any contact information you'd like to share in the bar. For those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live, please comment if you have anything you'd like to tell the authors, and especially if you have a question you'd like to ask. All comments will be monitored and relayed to the authors in real time. The authors will be reading only briefly, so we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. All of the books discussed here tonight should be available through your local bookstore. Let's all use the hashtags Rogue Reads and Rogue Women Writers as we talk about our experiences with these authors and their works. As I said, my name is Lisa Black. I'm the author of 16 novels featuring forensic specialists, which happens to be my day job. And today we're actually broadcasting from my local police department forensics lab because thanks to Hurricane Ian, I have no internet access at home. I am based here in Florida, and I am delighted to be emceeing this event. As always, there are so many facets to these 4 authors that I could ask questions for like 4 hours each. So it's difficult to narrow down, but we're going to try and do this anyway at our first Rogue Reads Halloween party. New York Times bestselling author TASHA ALEXANDER is the daughter of 2 philosophy professors and grew up convinced that she had been meant to live in the pioneer age. She and her husband, novelist Andrew Grant, live in Wyoming, where their log cabin fulfills her prairie longing. In her new book, Secrets of the Nile, Lady Emily and her husband Colin have joined his formidable mother on a holiday to visit the exotic treasures of Egypt, then under British rule. Their host, a renowned amateur British collector of antiquities, has invited his closest friends on a lavish cruise up the Nile to his home at Luxor. But after a welcome toast, the host is dead from cyanide, and it's up to Emily and Colin to unmask one of their shipmates as a killer. If this all sounds very similar to a favorite Agatha Christie tale, that's entirely on purpose. Emily's favorite snack and drink would be port with Stilton and walnuts, but Tasha's latest favorite is an elderflower French champagne cocktail. Elderflower, for those like me who didn't know that, is from the flower of the elder tree and is made from and aside from being tasty, is good for the common cold. So, Tasha, tell us, what is your favorite Halloween costume, and is it the one you're wearing?
Well, I love costume. Also, I didn't know that about elderflower. Now I know that that cocktail is essentially a health drink. So this is a result. I've always liked this costume because it's got the wig, and I want to be Princess Leia. I wish I had a blaster, but they're not real, so I guess. But I like having the wig because I don't have to do my hair, which I think is a big plus. I really don't know. I was saying this to you earlier, Lisa. I feel like we don't get to wear costumes enough. And I would like to have a Queen of the Nile costume. I would like there's so many costumes I would like to have. If only I had the occasions to wear them. But I'm pretty happy with my ill-fitting, badly tailored Princess Leia costume.
Well, good job. Our next author, GIGI Pandian, is a USA Today bestselling and award-winning mystery author, breast cancer survivor, and accidental almost vegan. She spent her childhood tagging along with cultural anthropologist parents and was awarded a Malice domestic grant for her debut novel, Artifact, and then went on to win Agatha, Anthony, Lefty, and Derringer Awards. Along with Kelly Garrett and Walter Mosley, GIGI is a co-founder of Crime Writers of Color. She lives outside San Francisco with her husband and a gargoyle who watches over her garden. Under Lock and Skeleton Key came out this past March, and it's perfect for Halloween. After a disastrous stage accident derails Tempest Raj's career, she heads back to her childhood home where her father's company creates houses with sliding bookcases and secret passages. But when Tempest's former stage double is discovered dead inside a wallet that's supposedly been sealed for more than a century, Tempest can't help but wonder if the Raj family curse has finally come for her. Tempest loves to drink a combination of instant coffee, milk, and jaggery, unprocessed sugar common in India. So Gigi, what is your favorite Halloween treat?
So I'm so sad that right before I came on, I was gonna have my Halloween costume too, just like you two. But so I'm always a vampire. This started very young, since first grade. That was the first photographic evidence that I was a vampire. It was really like with those plastic big things in there and this black dress and stuff. So it started early. But so in graduate school, I had custom vampire teeth made. When I lived in Seattle, there's a store called Gargoyle Statuary, which, as you can imagine, was a store made for me. But around Halloween, they had someone who came in to make custom fangs. They make like a mold for your teeth. And so I had these made. They survived for more than 20 years. And so I pulled them out every year. I pulled them out and cleaned them, and they broke. Like, finally, that is the shelf life of custom fangs, apparently, is a little over 20 years. So I'm so sorry.
Knew?
I have no fangs for you all today. But I'm with you there in the Halloween spirit of being a vampire. But at least I have my gargoyles behind me.
Oh, true. You can never have enough gargoyles. I think of all the costumes, I don't think I've ever been a vampire, actually. I'm usually either a cat or a princess. If I can wear kitty ears or a tiara, then, I'm there. That's pretty much all you need.
The one challenge, though, I do have to say is, since the custom vampire teeth, they stay in, it is very hard at parties, because I'll end up with little bite marks on my bottom lip, and I can't eat anything very much, and drinking is dangerous. So I love them, but maybe it's time. Maybe it's a sign it's time to move on and explore something else. We'll see.
Could be. Okay. Marcie Rendon is a member of the White Earth Nation of North Central Minnesota. She is Anishinaabe, called Ojibwe by Europeans, also known as Chippewa. She is an author, playwright, poet, freelance writer of both fiction and nonfiction, and community arts activist who supports other Native American artists. The creative mind behind Raving Native Theater, Marcie has also curated community-created performances and received a fellowship for work with women incarcerated in county jails. She lives in Minneapolis. Sinister Graves is the third outing with Cash Blackbear, a 19-year-old Ojibwe woman, the product of bad foster homes, who sometimes helps her guardian, Sheriff Wheaton, on his investigations. Melting snows float up the body of an unidentified woman who carries no clue except for the torn page of a hymnal in both English and Ojibwe. To learn more, Cash knows she will have to return to the White Earth Reservation, a place she once called home. Cash's food of choice is a carefully made tuna fish sandwich, which sounds absolutely fabulous, and you can find the recipe and a helpful video on our website. So, Marcie, Halloween, Day of the Dead, do you observe it? And what are your traditions around it, around this time of the year?
Halloween is one of my family's favorite holidays. I have three adult daughters, 12 grandchildren, so it's this wild event of costumes and as much chocolate as people can get.
Absolutely.
Everybody loves trick-or-treating, and most recently, I stay home and hand out candy to whoever shows up.
Well, that sounds fun. I am in like a very unbuilt section of town. There's like a lot of vacant lots still around us. Okay. We've had trick-or-treaters exactly once, one group of like 4 kids in 22 years. But we always buy candy, because then we have candy. So, it works out, Our last author, ERIN E, is not only a writer, but an actress, and like Marcie, a playwright. She has MFAs in both writing and acting, and encourages artists to engage in all kinds of storytelling: podcasts, books, newspapers, blogs, family stories, community stories, history, etc. ERIN lives in New York City, and she likes to toast a good story with Cabernet Sauvignon and gobs, which, from what I can tell from the recipe, are what we call whoopie pies down here in Florida. See our website for more recipes. In Erin's debut novel, Jackal, and I have to share with you first, this was in my Sunday paper,
Wow!
a full-page review.
Oh,
Very nice. In Jackal, Liz Rocher is coming home reluctantly. As a Black woman, Liz doesn't exactly have fond memories of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, but her best friend is getting married, so she braces herself for a weekend of awkward and passive-aggressive reunions. Liz is grown and can handle whatever awaits her. But on the day of the wedding, the bride's daughter, Carolyn, goes missing, leaving only a piece of white fabric covered in blood. Is there a literal monster in the woods, or is the enemy all too human? We're going to hear a little from the book, but in a moment. But first, Halloween. Did you like the holiday growing up? Do you have a favorite treat, favorite costume?
Yeah, I always loved Halloween growing up. And my favorite, I am one of those strange people who loves candy corn. I know it's a very divisive opinion, but I love
like it.
I love candy corn. I know it's
Yeah.
just like it's sugar wax. I don't know why.
What's
and
not to
then
love?
I know, like, it's just sweet. And then when it comes to a costume, very recently I've become a fan of, I'm not wearing costume right now, but I love dressing up as objects. Like I went as a faucet one year and it was like my favorite thing. Like just have like a a silver unicorn faucet thing, and then we're all silver, and I'm like, I'm a faucet. And so I'm a fan of object costumes.
Well, that is definitely unique.
Yes.
I think the most unique costume I ever went as was an accident victim, because I just started working at the coroner's office. So I like wrapped myself up in bandages and fake blood, and I took different colored balloons and cut an old shirt so that it looked like my organs were popping out. I had the heart and the stomach and the gall.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Except I made it up like a couple days before, and then they had like deflated by the time the party rolled around. So then I had to do some quick fixing.
Yeah.
Okay, now to hear more about these books and ask some more specific questions of our authors, we're going to go back to Tasha. And first I have to ask, I assume you've been to, oh no, wait. First we want to hear if Tasha, you could read some of Secrets of the Nile.
I will, but it would be so much better if my husband would, because he's a British.
Oh, you froze.
But
That's true. That accent, gets us every time.
I mean, it does, and they can say anything, and you're just like, talk more.
Yeah.
All right, so this is not the very, very beginning of the book, but just a little snippet. Obviously it's a mystery, but this is kind of the bit I'm going to read is just more kind of arriving in Egypt and what Egypt is like. The sublime difference between a cold, wet English winter and Egypt's golden sun cannot be overstated. Snow fell at Anglemore over Christmas, but it turned to rain soon after the turn of the new year when we set off on our journey. Egypt was a whole different world. It's always a bit shocking how quickly the damp that settles into one's bones on a wet island can be eroded. Colin's mother had set off in advance in order to prepare a boat for our journey, unwilling to leave the arrangements to anyone else. Lord Dealey owned one of the finest private steamers on the Nile, but she refused to travel on it. She wanted to see Egypt as she had on her first trip there, from the deck of a dahabeah. These elegant boats, direct descendants of those that glided along the river in antiquity, relied on two large sails for propulsion, backed up by the strong arms of a crew of rowers. The wind was not always favorable, especially when traveling against the current upstream to Luxor. I will forever be grateful to her for insisting on this mode of transportation. The timsa, Arabic for crocodile, our floating home, was perfectly appointed. A spacious saloon at the stern contained a long oak dining table and bookshelves teeming with volumes about Egypt. Most interesting to me, Adolf Erman's Egyptian grammar, translated into English by his former student, James Breasted, an American affiliated with the University of Chicago and the head of their Haskell Oriental Museum. As an amateur linguist, I'd long been impressed with the value the ancient Egyptians placed on the written word. Every ship that docked in Alexandria was required to turn over all the books on board so they could be copied and placed in the city's famous library. I relished the idea of taking up the study of hieroglyphs, particularly now when I had the opportunity to put the work to use at the monuments we visited. Lord Dealey's boat made far better time than ours, but I wouldn't have traded those quiet hours on the Nile for anything. The rumble of a steamer was intolerable compared to the sound of the breeze filling our sails. The weeks we spent making our way up the river, stopping to explore ruins and admire the local wildlife, were some of the most pleasant of my life. We stood on the barren desert plain at Amarna, where the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten had built a new capital city in the 14th century BC. He temporarily revolutionized Egyptian religion, insisting his people worship only the sun god Aten. This did not win him supporters among the powerful priests who served other gods, and after his death, his son brought back the old religion, abandoned his father's city, and returned to Thebes. We visited every pyramid we could find, from those at Giza to Djoser's step pyramid at Saqqara, and the red and bent pyramids at Dashur. Whenever I found hieroglyphic inscriptions, I copied them into a notebook and back on board the boat did my best to puzzle out reasonable translations. The language was a trial and a delight, a perfect challenge. The entire journey was spectacular. Thoroughly enchanted and relaxed, at last, and too soon, we came around a curve and saw Luxor before us. We had all gathered on the upper deck to watch as the town rose from the eastern bank of the river, a jumble of modern buildings that gave way to the ruins of the ancient temples of Luxor and Karnak. To the west, green fields fertilized with the rich silt left by the annual inundation stretched to the desert and the Valley of the Kings, where the looming cliffs were still bathed rose gold by the last remnants of the sunrise.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
Thank
So
you.
I assume you've been to Egypt, which is also an obsession of mine.
I have not, because,
Really?
well, we were booked to go in COVID.
Oh,
And so I've spent my entire life since I was a very small child when my parents took me to the Field Museum in Chicago to see the King Tut exhibit, the famous King Tut exhibit, right?
yes.
I have desperately been wanting to go to Egypt since then. This would have been the time, but COVID. So
Oh.
instead, it's a lifetime of reading about Egypt, thinking about Egypt. I'm such a nerd. I actually studied Middle Egyptian. I'm so obsessed with Egypt. But someday, Lisa, let's go together.
Yeah. Fabulous. I would absolutely love that. So the intrigue in your book revolves in part around a Ushabti, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is a small figurine tucked into someone's tomb after having been inscribed with a spell that could make it come to life in the afterlife and perform all the menial tasks for the dead person, like scrubbing your toilets and things that you don't want to do. They would often be carved with the tools that they would need to perform these tasks, like farming and household duties. A very rich person might be buried with one for each day of the year. So did you base the Ushabti in your book on like a real one in a real person's tomb, or?
Really on lots of them. They're such fascinating little sculptures. And actually, Andrew, when the book came out, he bought me 5 of them. And I was kind of hoping that they might step up to clean the toilet while I was still alive. Evidently, it doesn't work that way.
No, you have to be dead, right?
No, unfortunately have to be dead, but it's such a charming, they're so charming. So they can be very tiny, they can be huge, depending on, if you're the pharaoh, you might have larger ones. If you're the pharaoh, you're gonna have hundreds and hundreds of them. But what fascinated me, 2 things fascinated me about them. One is the spell that's written on them. It essentially starts saying, I am here. I'm here. So the Ushabti saying, I'm here, ready to serve you however you need. And I just think that's so, I don't know, sweetly charming. But also everyone had them. This wasn't just something that the wealthy had. Everybody had Ushabtis, which, it's such a, I don't know, you think about, contemporary religion, and there's so much of this, you have to live your life this way so that you're not burning in hell forever. I love this idea that the Egyptians are treating everyone equally, but if you get into the afterlife, this idea that these little sculptures are going to make it so that you don't have to do work. I really like that. There's
kind of
something
nice.
really charming about that.
So would the deceased person like carve their own like before they died, or did the family members do it for them after they died?
No, you would buy them. You would hire, you would either just go and, I mean, this was part of a huge funeral industry in ancient Egypt. We all have seen pictures of the tombs, especially with Tut, and the grave goods. And this was an industry. This would be like today, if we go into a funeral home, you get, you pick out the coffin, right? This would be, you're gonna need some Yishapis, you're gonna need a book of threads, all the spells are there. So you would either just kind of buy them from someone who had already made them, or if you were more well off, you might hire a specific sculptor to make them for you.
So Secrets of the Nile is your 16th book within the Lady Emily series. So what has changed most for Emily in all that time?
She's grown up a little bit. She, in the early books, was very young and very impulsive, and she's still impulsive, but she's matured some. So she sometimes will curb that impulsiveness. Sometimes she won't. And I think this is one of the things, as we all get older, we don't really change from who we were when we were younger, but we maybe are more deliberate about managing parts of our personalities or our characters that we've come to see aren't always helpful. Right?
True.
So I would say that her impulsiveness is still there, but it's more deliberate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you wrote this book as an homage to Agatha Christie's Death on the Nile. It's like, why that particular book?
Well, when I was sitting down to start thinking about this book and doing the research, I thought about Egypt for such a long, long time, my whole life. And I had always wanted to send Emily to Egypt. And when I was first sitting down to think about it, I thought, well, how do I start? Well, how can you not start with rereading Death on the Nile, right? I mean, it's such an amazing book. And when I went to pick it up, I realized I hadn't reread Agatha Christie in so long. So I reread Death on the Nile, and it just really lit a fire under me. It reminded me how good those books are. And so I actually reread all of the Poirot novels, just in rapid succession. And it was just such a delight. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't have the book just be on the boat. So it's more that they're in Luxor on the house, in a house in Luxor, or right outside Luxor. But just reading all those wonderful Poirot novels, I really wanted this book to be an homage to Poirot and to Agatha Christie, because they're just such wonderful, wonderful stories that Christie wrote, and Poirot is such a fun character. So there are a lot of nods to him in this book.
And you say you're the master of packing light. So I have to ask, like, what's the longest trip you've ever pulled off with the smallest bag?
Well, I spent 10 weeks in France actually doing book research, and all I took was a carry-on suitcase.
That's impressive.
So my
That's
rule
very,
is,
very impressive.
if I cannot run through the airport with it, it can't come. I just hate checking luggage, and they can lose it. It's just yeah. So I'm very big on compression packing cubes. can really make things go a long way. You can cram a lot into a carry-on. The only thing, you can't be precious about shoes. You just have to have, I have a
Yeah,
pair of boots that I can wear.
shoes are the hard part. Yeah.
They've been on the Great Wall of China. They've been on the Acropolis. They go everywhere, and they're the only, you know, if you can have just one pair of shoes that you're wearing on the plane and not carrying anything else, you have a lot more room in your suitcase. You
True.
can get
True.
a lot done if you're not carrying shoes.
Yeah. Okay, Gigi wants to know, yet you are a fellow Elizabeth Peters devotee. Did Amelia Peabody inspire your love of Egypt, or vice versa?
It was actually kind of vice versa. I had loved Egypt for so long, and it was only, I must have been, gosh, probably in my late 20s when my mom said to me one day, "Have you read the Amelia Peabody series?" I said, "What is the Amelia Peabody series?" And she told me, and I just immediately, oh my God. I mean, Amelia is one of the best characters ever written. I absolutely adore Elizabeth Peters. There's actually a kind of quiet scene, not even a whole scene, just a little bit in this book where I couldn't have Emily in Egypt and not see Amelia. But at the same time, I didn't want to put words in Amelia's mouth or anything. So, but there is just a little paragraph where Emily is in Luxor, actually talking to Howard Carter, and a British woman comes over with a chatelaine belt with all of her tools on it. It's clear, if you know the Amelia books, you'll know it's Amelia, but I had to have them at least run into each other. But
Yeah.
Books are just brilliant. Yeah, she was just such a brilliant, intelligent, witty, perfect writer.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, let's hear from Gigi now about her book. And do you have a section that you're going to read for us?
I do. I, like Tasha, picked something that is not quite at the beginning, but I wanted to pick something that had a little bit of a spooky element in it for our Halloween celebration today.
Okay.
As Tempest's dad loved to say, what happens when a carpenter and a stage magician fall in love? They form a secret staircase construction business to bring magic to people through their homes. The idea was quite romantic. Tempest's parents specialized in building ingeniously hidden rooms for people who fancied a bookshelf that slid open when you reached for the adventures of Sherlock Holmes or Nancy Drew in the Hidden Staircase, or a secret reading nook that only appeared when you said the words "Open Sesame," or perhaps a door in a grandfather clock that led to a secret garden. Tempest's house had all three features, and many more, including the treehouse in back. Tempest loved every inch of it. What she didn't love was the fact that at 26, she'd been forced to move back. Worse yet, if she didn't receive the job offer she hoped to today, she'd be forced to accept her dad's idea that she come work for Secret Staircase Construction. She'd been named one of the top 25 under 25 young entertainers in a prominent entertainment magazine 3 years ago. And that success meant she could not only live lavishly, but also send money home. It was humiliating enough to be back in her childhood bedroom, but to work as her dad's assistant when she knew he didn't need one, she hoped it didn't come to that. She followed the downward slope of the hill to the bright red front door of the treehouse. No ordinary key unlocked this door. The door handle was smooth with no opening for a key. It was the grinning gargoyle door knocker that held the secret to letting you into the house. The person standing on the threshold needed to place a 3-inch brass skeleton key sideways in the gargoyle's mouth, as if he were clenching it in his pointy teeth, then twist. The gargoyle's teeth bit down on the key. The door unlocked. The door wasn't locked just now. Even if it had been, it wasn't especially secure. This was never meant to be a permanent house. Much like the rest of the dwelling, the front door lock was one of Tempest's parents' many experiments to create whimsical keys for indoor secret rooms. When her grandparents moved in 5 years ago, they never got around to installing a proper lock. It wasn't like much crime ever happened around Hidden Creek. The only crime of interest that had happened in the town's long history was the one that involved Tempest's own family. Tempest glanced at the 8 silver charms dangling from the bracelet she wore all the time. The thick bracelet, made of chunky charms related to her mom Emma's love of magic, was the last thing her mom had given her before she vanished live on stage 5 years ago. The vanishing act wasn't part of the show, and Emma Raj had never been seen since. That was the first time that Tempest began to wonder if the legendary Raj family curse was real after all.
I did love the book. And
Oh, thank you.
I did love you. There is such a great similarity between being a magician and being a mystery writer, because both are all about misdirection. You have to give the reader the clues to steer, but then steer them firmly away from it. So what are your favorite ways to do that?
So I got into locked room mysteries, impossible crime mysteries, from novels from the golden age of detective fiction, when there was, when puzzle plot mysteries were all the rage, and impossible crimes are like the ultimate puzzle plot. And so I got into magic from books. So I wasn't originally a fan of stage magicians. It was really just reading mystery novels. And there was lots of magicians in detective fiction in the golden age. So like in the 1930s, you can find a lot more magicians in mystery fiction than you can today, which is so interesting. So then I started getting into stage magic and learning more about that. And I loved being able to put my own twist on writing locked room mysteries. I got so many ideas for my books, not from thinking about plotting a book, but really from watching how a stage magician really does misdirect you. So it can be even just as simple as, it's so interesting to me how if you're not an audience member of a magician, but you just are passing by and look in, you can often see how the trick is done. But a stage magician is so expert at drawing your attention where they want you to go, that if you're watching the whole act, you will never see how they did it, compared to the person who just stops in halfway through, because you've been misdirected like that. And so it was really fun for me to think about how I could apply that in my own fiction. And I start writing on paper so I can work things out like kind of like visually and see how it works like that before I ever move to the computer.
Very interesting. So please tell me there really are such companies that will create the kind of homes we all wish we had as a kid.
You know,
the closest I've seen, I went to a winery in Napa Valley that the owner built, it, new to look like a castle, complete with a drawbridge and a moat and a torture chamber.
Oh, what winery is that? Do you remember? I have to take a note.
Yeah, I looked it up. Castello di Amorosa.
I'm writing that down. So there are lots of, so I have the sad answer that I don't like is that there actually are lots of kits that you can buy now, that if you want to give yourself like a sliding bookcase in front of a doorway in your house, you can actually buy a kit and build that, which on some level is cool that you can do this little DIY thing. But I don't like the idea of this out of the box solution. I love the idea of like having something that's catered exactly to your loves. And so that's what in Tempest Family, that the business really, they interview you and they make up this whole story surrounding what's, personal to what you want to have as this part of your house. But there are, I found during quarantine, I went down the rabbit hole of watching so many YouTube videos, and much like Tasha, I actually had a book research trip planned for the spring of 2020 that got canceled, and I had to change gears with what I was writing. But that's actually what led me to figuring out how to tell the story of this book, which was a very different book before the pandemic happened. And I was able to find the heart of the story then. But instead of research trip, I went down the YouTube rabbit hole, and there are people who build things like that. But as far as I know, there's not a company that only does that, but there are some people that have been asked to do that have done really cool things.
Wow. I also adored John Dixon Carr. my current character in my new series is, her last name is Carr. She's named after John Dixon Carr. So, so have your readers reacted to your many references to the Golden Age mysteries in your books? Do you find that younger readers don't know who they are, or will they surprise me with their knowledge?
Yeah, so it's been a wide range of feedback. I love that I can pay homage to these books that I love, that I can share that love with people who have a similar love, and so that they'll get all the nods. That I reference some things that are more explicit than other things, and so I love that people who already know those things and love them can get the references. But it's also been fun to hear about people who have gone to look up the books after enjoying what may have been reading their first Black Room mystery. So it's been all over the place. It's been really fun, which is also has been cool, because when I was working on the book, I didn't really know how to characterize it and where exactly it fits. And so it's just been fun to hear that different types of readers have responded to it, which has been really fun.
Cool. So back to Halloween. You love cooking. Do you make your own Halloween treats?
I don't make my own Halloween treats to give out, but this is definitely a month that I do lots of cooking, because, you know, starting to be fall and all sorts of wonderful fall recipes. But I'm really sad. So I have a book deadline the day after Halloween. And so I think it may have been a sign that my vampire teeth broke this year, because I don't know that I'm going to get out this year for Halloween, because the book, it's the third book in the Secret Staircase series that's due to my editor the day after Halloween. And now that it is approaching, I'm like, why did we pick that deadline? I don't know, but it's almost there. But yeah.
I'll just remember Douglas Adams said, you know, I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they go by. Well, okay, now let's hear from Marcie. If we can hear a bit of Sinister Graves, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'm going to read right from the very beginning. And I'm going to kind of skip. But Cash sat in a battered fishing boat on murky floodwater that was headed to the Red River. The spring flood covered the valley as far to the east and west as she could see. Schools had closed. No one could get to church to pray. The prehistoric glacial Lake Agassiz existed once again. What had been plowed fields of wheat and corn, soybeans and oats, potatoes and sugar beets was now an ice-cold snowmelt lake, 60 miles wide from one side of the valley to the other. Then I'm going to skip a bunch. Cash had spent 11 hours the day before throwing sandbags with a chain of humans. One end filled bags with sand, then 10 to 15 people passed the full bags to those at the end of the line, who laid the sandbags like bricks to create a dike in order to keep the river from flooding downtown Fargo. It was a rush against the forces of nature. When Cash arrived home after helping fill sandbags, she was so bone weary she flopped into bed without getting undressed and didn't wake until the insistent ringing of her landline woke her. No one except Wheaton ever called. What few friends she had given up on her ever answering her phone. Most just dropped by and hollered up at her apartment, or made the journey up the flight of stairs and knocked. But that early morning phone call rang and rang. It had stopped briefly, then started ringing again. Cash finally pushed herself off the bed and stumbled to the kitchen where the beige rotary phone sat on the counter. She picked up the handset. Yeah? Cash, it's Wheaton. What are you doing? Sleeping. There's a flood out there. Silence. What? We have a body here that floated into town. Silence. Where? Ada. Highway 75 is flooded. I don't even know if I can get over to Moorhead. Last night they were saying the river might crest over the bridges in downtown. Maybe someone's got a boat that could get you out here. More silence. You'd have to follow the road up. Stay away from the river. River's going too fast to try and get on. Maybe a boat with a motor could get you up Highway 75 or 9. 9 might be safer. Water's not as deep, and there really is no current. The water is just sitting on the fields waiting for the river to empty up north. Cash had leaned her head against the counter. Her waist-length braids slid over one shoulder. Even though she worked out each week in the judo class at the university, the muscles in her arms holding the phone had been sore from moving sandbags all day. She pulled the headset away from her ear and stared at it. Cash? Yeah, okay. She hung up. The phone rang again. Cash? What? You hung up. Are you coming? I said okay. And she hung up again.
She sounds very fun and interesting and a little scary. Later in the book, she's going to encounter this kind of scary, almost like a cult going on in this church where she thinks this dead woman might have come from. Is that sort of cult based on an actual group, based on an actual experience, or?
No, I think that in my mind when I was writing, what I was thinking about was the devastation that Christianity has brought to Native people. And I think that that's where this whole idea about this singular church and like this minister and his wife sort of represent the whole picture of what Christianity has done to different Native communities.
Okay. I did a deep dive into cults like 2 books ago, so it's like it's still a topic that absolutely fascinates me. So I'm in your write-ups about sinister graves in your summaries, you mentioned a dead ghost more than once, and that really confused me because I thought, aren't all ghosts dead?
Did I write it or did somebody else write a blurb kind of thing?
I don't know. I thought it was you, but I could be confused.
Yeah.
I was skipping around. Yeah, it said
don't know that I ever
it had the
talked
phrase "dead
Yeah, I don't
ghosts"
know.
like 3 times. I'm like,
I don't ever talk about ghosts because I think in our worldview there are like physical human beings and then there are spirit beings. So I'm thinking that you probably,
it wasn't something you wrote. Okay, ghosts are dead. We can
familiar, but
establish that. Okay. Well, along that line, Cash has a lot of street smarts, but she also gets like vibes. So can you tell us, how and why these like psychic flashes of hers happen and how they play into the story?
So in Ojibwe culture, a lot of attention is paid to dreams and to our intuition. And I think that as a Native woman, I write from my experience, and that has gotten into my stories. Cash has the capacity to dream and to, have dreams that talk about things that are going to happen or that are happening. And then given her time in foster care where there was a lot of times where she was just left on her own, she's kind of spent a lot of time developing her intuition. And that's part of the background of her story.
And how does the sheriff feel about, does he like brush that off, or does he completely believe that she has this intuition, or?
Like he has known Cash since she was like 3 years old, and he's been peripherally involved in her life, and so he's been like, he knows that she has these abilities and trusts her, so when she says, well, I think this or I see this, he kind of says, okay. One thing that I was on another talk yesterday, and one thing that we notice is that in all 3 of the Cash Black Bear books, the sheriff never solves the crime. It's Cash that solves the crime, and then she sort of brings it to Wheaton, the sheriff, and says, here, now you deal with it. You deal with the paperwork. You deal with the other agencies. It was like, oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's the Cash Black Bear series and not the Sheriff Wheaton series.
Right.
But makes sense.
She's 19. She's a farm laborer. She's not employed in the
Mhm,
by the sheriff.
mhm. And the series is set in the 1970s. So why that time period? And is it just because it was so much easier to write mysteries when not everybody had a cell phone?
Um, I had been writing crime and felt like I wasn't succeeding, and so I was trying to write like a more female centered, I don't know, like chick lit or something. And so I was working on that novel, and Cash, this character, like literally kind of appeared in my mind, and she was like, "Oh, no, no, no." And as soon as I started to write this story that was related to Cash, I could tell that it was working.
Cool. Now, you and Diego Vasquez Jr. established a women's poetry writing program for 200 incarcerated women. What inspired you? I mean, that is just so amazing. What inspired you to create that program?
It was actually Diego's idea.
Mhm.
I have worked previously, you know, my job as a counselor in the state prison system. I've worked in the 5 state
Ah.
prisons here, working with Native Americans pre-release, and then done some work with the Native women at Shakopee, the women's prison here. And then Diego had this idea, like, why don't we do this? Because there's so many programs for men in jails,
Hmm.
or even in the prisons. And so he said, well, why don't we do something specifically for women? And so he and I collaborated and pitched the idea to 3 of the county jails here in the Twin Cities area, and did that work for all those women. And we created chapbooks. Every time we went, the women got chapbooks of their poetry, and then we did a spoken word event in the jail for all the other women in the unit. So the women got their books, and then they got to perform their work to the rest of the people incarcerated.
Wow, that is amazing.
It was a wonderful thing to do.
Okay, well, now I'd like to hear from Erin and hear part of Jackal, which I've been really interested to hear because it sounds like a fascinating one.
All right. Hello all. So I also have a chapter. It's chapter 3. It's towards the beginning. But it has the creepy poem that repeats throughout the book. So I figured let's start there. So, a man and a shadow live in the trees. When they walk in time, both are pleased. If one calls your name or the other tempts you off the path, you must ignore both or face their wrath. The same way I'm hesitant around large bodies of water and the police, I'm nervous around the woods. Not that I can't trust these things, they just need to be proven worthy. Look at that rhyme. That's 2 couplets of stay out of the woods. The first time I heard it was junior year of high school. Mel recited it as she guided me out of the trees, said her dad taught it to her. She tried to make it sound like fairies or something twee. She was attempting to comfort me and tell me I was going to be okay. She clutched my hand and assured me that I wasn't going to bleed to death from the gash in my arm. Now I'm standing outside her wedding venue. There's no mistaking it. Mel has dragged me back to the woods. I have to resist the urge to whirl around in circles, checking the spaces between the branches. Instead, I focus on the bits of civilization in front of me. In the middle of the clearing, there's a barn, not one of those built for photographs and parties, a real barn. Thank God Nick has put some work into making it wedding ready. Fresh coat of paint, there are outlets, a dance floor, and if I peer in, I can see a small kitchen and a bar. A few feet away from the barn are bathrooms, a welcome amenity. 2 matching buildings on the side are dressing areas. Beyond all this, the field drops off to reveal a stunning view. Interlocking symmetrical hills, densely packed greenery. It stretches out in front of me. I search for the end of it. There is none. Not a hint of a brick building or a paved road. My mouth goes dry. I try to swallow, but my throat clutches against itself in vain. I turn away. Walking toward the dressing rooms, I search for water when someone catches my eye. Garrett? I ask because the black man I spot in the corner of the venue is smoking. The love of Mel's life, Garrett, does not smoke. He coughs to disperse the cloud around him. Too late, I've caught him. Liz! Garrett smiles too big and greets me too enthusiastically. How the hell are you? Garrett Washington is fundamentally kind. I can tell. Some men you can sense the danger lurking behind their eyes, like with Nick. Men don't have to be kind the way women do. I think I should be asking you that. How's, well, everything? Got here in one piece. He glances toward the dressing rooms. Plan to stay that way if Mel and Mrs. Parker don't tear each other's heads off. That bad? He gives a low whistle. We thought we thought they'd get it together for the wedding, try to make the day easy. He leans in to share the secret. It seems she thinks she can turn Mel into a runaway bride. Jesus Christ. I can't help but feel bad. For Mel's parents, it was okay to be friends with the blacks, just don't bring one home. It didn't help that Mel was 3 months pregnant when she did. Garrett manages a dry laugh. Mrs. Parker loves my daughter. Always there for us. We need a sitter, picks her up from school, just loves her, right? Me? Garrett points to himself and takes in what he's about to say. I'm the problem. I shake my head in solidarity. That sucks. I'm sorry. Someone needs to apologize for what they've been through. Might as well be me. That's it. That's all.
Sounds really interesting. Now, the book is set in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is where
Yes.
you grow up.
Yes.
And we're in 1889. The dam broke. Some say because the reservoir had been converted to a private resort lake for wealthy industrials, killed well over 2,000 people.
Mhm.
Then in 1923, a shootout with a black man left 4 police officers dead, and Mayor Joseph Caulfield ordered every black or Hispanic person who had lived in Johnstown for less than 7 years to leave town.
Yep.
The KKK burned 12 crosses around town just to emphasize the point. The order was condemned around the country, and Caulfield did lose the election, but that was scant comfort for the 2,000 people who walked away from their homes in less than 2 weeks. So did these tragedies of Johnstown like overshadow your childhood when you were young? Did you talk about them, or were they like never talked about and never mentioned?
So the flood was the flood is you can't escape the flood. It's all over town. It's there's a couple of early drafts and thankfully a lot of it still made it into the book, where you can literally see the water lines on the buildings still when you walk around town. Some of them have like the brass bars, that'll tell you the year, but some of them it's just water lines, and you look up, you're like, oh yeah, that's an old building. There's lots of like history. There's a museum. There's the town's, one of the other claim to fame of Johnstown is it's home of the world's steepest vehicular inclined plane. It is essentially, yeah, I know. It's essentially an inclined plane, or like a very large elevator you can put a vehicle on and take it up the side of the mountain. And that was created to help people during the flood, like getting stuff up, basically to a higher elevation. Quickly. So yeah, the flood is all over Johnstown. They teach it about it in history. It's everywhere. The Great Banishment is something that I found out like midway through drafting this book. Yeah, at my grown age, I did not know about that at all when I was growing up and living in Johnstown. But when I found out about it, I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so it was very interesting to start the book, kind of using one historical event that I just through osmosis, just know a ton about. And then another event that like I had to research, do proper research for.
Like very interesting. So did all that history in some way give you the idea for Jackal?
Kind of, yeah. Jackal started very much that I wanted to write my own kind of urban legend. I had fallen down, we were talking, there's like, it's in the air of the research spirals or the YouTube spirals that writers go down. And I went down one of those for the Cropsey urban legend that's over from Staten Island, that the real story is a very devastating story about the failure of a system to keep children safe. And that just was so striking to me that there was there was a real story behind this terrifying legend. And when thinking about my hometown, which, I feel like by virtue of there being a massive disaster, at the baseline is baseline haunted already. I was like, oh, I want to like make my own legend to try and decipher or try to pick apart some of the anxieties I had growing up there. And anxieties that were, have been brought to the forefront recently in light of, recent political events. So I guess something where it's like not directly led to the inspiration for JACKAL, but like also, led to the inspiration for JACKAL.
So you left Johnstown and went off to the Big Apple. How did you do it? How did you break into acting?
Oh man, wow. I am actually acting is what kind of initially started getting me out of town. I went to the Interlochen Arts Academy for summer to do like an acting thing. And then after that, I applied to the school. And so my last year of high school, I went to Interlochen for an acting, to study acting for a year. And then that school really helped me in applying to colleges. And then I went to Brown University. And there at Brown, even though my degree is in literary arts and writing, I did a lot of theater. And then after I got all my fancy degrees in writing, I was like, great, I want to go be an actor. And just like auditioned for stuff. I got a really great apprenticeship. I did that. I moved to New York.
Wow.
I just kept auditioning and doing stuff. And so it's kind of, I kind of like acting just, it's very similar to writing in that I just was polite but persistent. I just was very polite, but I refused to go away. So
there's got to be like 200,000 aspiring actors out there who are going, I'm polite, I'm persistent. Yeah. Why am I not getting anywhere? You said, and you also write screenplays. You said once pacing and screenwriting, because I'm also trying to make that leap, which is silly in my case, but you said pacing and screenwriting is really quite rigid. So how did you adapt that to writing a novel?
It helped. It helped a lot, especially when it came to just some structural. In my revisions, I was having some structural problems just with pacing. It's like, you got to get the novel, you got to get it going. And then once we're like, on the story, we got to keep it moving. And so kind of sticking to those screenwriting guidelines would kind of help me, as I was reading or rereading, I was like, okay, I'm like, have we hit the midpoint yet? Am I sure it's the midpoint? And I want to be like, the midpoint should be clear. If it's not clear, it's not a good enough midpoint. So like, just kind of like sitting in that would help me. And also when things were dragging, to kind of give me some guidelines as to it. I'm like, okay, like you have to shorten, like figuring out where to cut, not just cutting indiscriminately. And then on the other side of that, when things felt too short, I was like, well, the decision your character made in the beginning, we haven't seen the payoff of that decision yet. So here's some, places that you can expand that's not going to feel like you're expanding for no reason.
Huh. It makes me think I should like take a screenwriting class and then go back to trying to write my novels, and I'd probably do better. Unfortunately, we're running up on the hour here. We're at 8:02, but I want to do a quick couple of round robins with you guys, and let's go in reverse order. So let's start with Erin. Plotter or pantser?
I'm a pantser. I'm so sorry. I just don't think about what is structure, and that's my problem. Is that I pants, and then I got to put structure on top of it. Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Marcie, do you plot things out or?
I have no idea how to create an outline. I just got to sit down and write.
Huh. Okay, Gigi.
I am the exact opposite of Marcie. So I cannot do, like, I'm frozen to actually write until I have an outline. But I've realized it's my security blanket. It goes out the window once I start, but it's absolutely an essential part of the process. But then I just let my characters lead once I get into it.
Okay, Tasha?
I could not write an outline if my life depended on it. I always think that writing a book, it's a lot like, you know, when you have small children and you tell them stories and you're just telling it as you go. And I can't know what happens in chapter 5 if I haven't told you everything that happens in chapters 1 through 4. I envy people who can write an outline so that they have some idea what they're doing. I just make it up as I go along and pray.
Oh,
well, not really.
no, I cannot. I mean, I keep telling myself every time that I'm going to make a really, really detailed outline and just hit every single thing. And I'm getting worse about that instead of better, but I will usually jot something down, but I do still have to, I'll know how it's going to begin, how it's going to end, who gets killed, why, who's killing them, what are the major clues. And I can't function. So I'm definitely
That's
a
an
plotter.
outline. That's an outline. An outline doesn't have to
It's
be like huge, but you've got the beats there.
Yeah, like you, I write it down and then I usually don't ever look at it again. But but I still have it in my brain. Okay, one more round. What is next? What are you working on now? What is your next goal coming up? Erin.
Like Gigi, I am also on that November 1st deadline for book 2, the Halloween deadline for book 2. It's going to be more of a domestic horror thriller about 2 Haitian sisters who encounter a mystery involving Haitian mysticism and spiritual deaths.
Oh, cool. Marcie, what are you working on now?
I have a script called Say Their Names about the missing and murdered Indian women that's going to have a staged reading at the History Theater November 7th.
Oh,
and
cool.
Then I'm working on a standalone contemporary novel that does have cell phones and DNA, not a cash novel. And then another children's book.
A very, very full plate.
Yes.
Gigi, what are you working on?
So I will be sending Erin very good finishing vibes so that we both meet our November 1st deadline. So that is for the 3rd book in my Secret Staircase series. The 2nd book, The Raven Thief, comes out next year. So there's 1 book. It's a series, so there'll be 1 book out each March. And I'm also alternating. I'm still writing my Accidental Alchemist mystery series. And so I will be, after I love to be able to have the finishing energy of a project and then totally switch gears and like let my editor do her thing on the book and then work on something new, a completely new project. So I'll be working on the next Accidental Alchemist novel while my editor does her thing with this book.
Okay. And Tasha?
Well, my Halloween was saved by an October 1st deadline. So I have just, where are we? What date is it? End of September, I turned in the next Emily, which is set in Scotland. And I'm actually gearing up to work on revisions for a standalone that I wrote before I wrote the Scotland book that is it's just completely different. It's a novel about a librarian during the siege of Leningrad in World War II.
Wow, very interesting. Well, this has been a wonderful Halloween party. I wish everyone their favorite Halloween treat. This is mine. And thank you so much to our 4 wonderful authors for spending this time with us. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you also to our viewers for joining us. And next month, tune in on November 14th and hear from Robin Cook, Vasim Khan, Francine Matthews, and Jess Lurie, which is bound to be a wonderful time. And happy Halloween, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.